Good morning, everybody. I think now we are all seated. I hope you have a good coffee, and then we can discuss what heat pumps can do for the European market and the status of the technologies development in Europe. So you see here in the background the European Parliament. That's our main area of work, where we try to shape the legislation that is favorable towards heat pumps. My name is Nowak. I'm the Secretary General of the European Heat Pump Association. I have a background in economics, and I strongly believe that we can fully decarbonize our society with 100% renewable energy and improving energy efficiency. I also have my own experience on this. I have a house that has a heat pump and a photovoltaic system and a ventilation system. I don't yet own an electric car. I also don't have a battery, but there is always some more goals in life to be pursued. So let's look at the Heat Pump Association. We are an industry association located in Brussels. We have members from every stage of the value chain, currently 130 members, and we have a few applications pending, so it will go up very soon. So if any of you that is listening and attending in wants to be represented in Brussels and has a strong interest in seeing heat pumps grow further, then please look at our website and consider becoming a member, because the more members we have, the better we are represented, the stronger we can be in favor of this technology. Just briefly to the heat pump people in this round, you know this, but to everybody else, we should stress that the European Heat Pump Association is not limited to any of the application fields. To the contrary, we talk about heat, we talk about cooling, we talk about hot water generation in all climate zones and in all application areas. And that's why you can see here residential buildings, commercial buildings, district heating systems. I didn't show an industrial setting, but that would look the same as in the lower picture. And even big buildings. This is St. John's Tower in London, and I'm putting it in all the time because it's important to show that district heating and heat pumps work very well together. This building here is basically a vertical district heating system, 52 stories, one big heat pump in the basement, and then lots of pipes that are supplied with heating and cooling. The heat pumps can work alone or in hybrids. And forget the detail of this picture. What's important to note is that heat pumps always provide heating and cooling in parallel, and that is also for us the most important benefit of this technology, and that's where we see in the future quite a nice business case to develop. And so how do we communicate this? In the past we have mentioned the heat pumps mainly as a heating device, but more and more it becomes obvious that the naming is not our best friend, because the same technology provides heat, provides air conditioning, provides dehumidification, and provides hot water. So you could say it is basically a Carnot cycle technology, and some people have suggested that because we are confused sometimes between heat pumps, air conditioning devices, refrigeration, and it's all the same technology. But to focus today, we will look mostly at the heating and hot water part of the equation. Our statistics gives a bit more detail also on the cooling or the air conditioning part. We will not look into refrigeration. As a side effect of the technology, we also see increasingly often that there is a benefit in the heat pumps serving as an integrated technology, bridging between electricity and heat. And so I have updated the previous graph by one more thing, because it's not only providing heating, cooling, refrigeration, and hot water, but also demand-side flexibility, and all from the same technology. How does it work in the market? We see at the moment that the market is growing very nicely, 4 times 12 or more than 12% since 2014. And we are now arriving at 1.3 million units. If this continues, we will be close to 1.5 million at the end of 2019. And then the total stock will be 13 million units. And what I can see at the moment is that there is no reason why it should not. We will hear in a minute from Valerie Laplagne about the French market, and we will also look at how we can use that tool maybe better in the future to make a forecast for the market. So what you see is that we have currently 11.8 million units installed and counting, and we think that this trend is continuing because the framework conditions, as I will explain them, are very favorable. I've separated out of this graph, the previous graph, the sanitary hot water heat pumps, because they are a special breed. The sanitary hot water heat pumps are, you could probably compare them pretty much to a fridge, not as simple, but
pretty close, because you can put them into your house. You only need to connect them to the cold water and the hot water pipes and plug them in. So they're typically a closed system. They're very easy to install. They work very reliably, and they are a very good entry point technology to those end users and installers that have not yet made positive experience with heat pumps. And so we consider them as a very, very good door opener for further heat pump deployment. You may start in an existing house with a gas boiler or an oil boiler adding. So here you see again 11.8 million units installed. We think that by the end of 2019, more than 13 million heat pumps will be installed. And as singled out, as I said, the sanitary hot water heat pumps, and there we have around 155,000 units, and also these are increasing. They're seeing a very nice growth trajectory. If we look at the different member states, then you can see that different building traditions and also different climates are responsible for a different distribution of technologies. And we have separated here in light blue the reversible air-to-air heat pumps that are providing some heating or all heating. And you can see them in Denmark, in Estonia, in Spain, in Finland, in France, in Italy, and also in the Baltics, in Lithuania, and Estonia, I said already, and in the Scandinavian countries, Norway and Sweden. And this is due to the way buildings are built in these countries. Then we have this reversible other, which is including all the other energy sources. So again, you see that these are in Spain, France, and Italy. And then you see sanitary hot water heat pumps, which have a specific high recognition in France due to the local building regulations. And then we have the traditional heat pumps connected to a hydronic system with geothermal energy in brown and with air in dark blue. And here you see that these are typically used in the center of Europe, Austria, Switzerland, Germany, but also to an increasing extent in France, and then also in the peripherals in the Netherlands and the UK. And we think, or we know actually, that these air-to-water heat pumps are they are following the biggest trend together with air-to-air, but air-to-water is growing at the moment slightly faster than air-to-air. If we look at the markets, who is leading the European heat pump market, then we see here that 3 countries are responsible for half the sales, and that is France, Italy, and Spain. And the next 7, so 10 countries altogether, are responsible for more than 90% of the sales. So we still have quite a concentrated set of markets that are responsible for the changes in the market, and all of them have still potential to grow. But you see also that markets like the UK, like Austria, like Switzerland, Portugal, and even Belgium are really very small compared to the total boiler market or the total heat generator market. And that leads me at least to the conclusion that there is a huge untapped potential in large heating and cooling markets. And that means also that we can be quite confident that the growth that we see at the moment will continue. And I'm very happy to hear in a minute from Valerie how this is seen from France, because you can see that the French market is the biggest market at the moment, and it has been the biggest market for the last years, and still it is growing. So if such a market that is getting more and more saturated is still growing, then probably all the other markets can continue that growth too. And here we can see what has happened. You can see here in the middle of the French market, and the French market is growing since 2011, but some other countries have done the same. What is quite interesting is that until 2014, we had some changes in the markets when they were developing. So sometimes they were growing, sometimes they were not growing. Now we see from the last year onwards that most markets are actually really continuing to grow. The Hungarian market is reducing by a small number, 500 units, and that may very well be that there is the data quality is not as good as we would like it to be. And the Swiss market is actually one of the ones that has been growing for a long time, so it's really coming close to saturation, and the same with the Austrian market. So we see that most of the European markets can grow, and I have made it here by percentages. And then we see that the only market that is really growing is reducing its sales big time is Hungary, but as I said, there's probably a data collection issue that we have to look into. And all other markets are growing apart from the saturated ones, or Switzerland and Austria. But Having said that, I would say that probably even they have more potential. We will look at that in a minute. If we look at the benefits of these heat pumps that are installed, then we have done a back of the envelope calculation. Some of it is based on Eurostat and the European Commission methodology. What we see here is that the 11.8 billion heat pumps installed provide 128 terawatt hours of renewable energy. And obviously that leads to final energy savings. The final energy savings are higher than the renewable energy because the calculation method is slightly different. So the final energy savings is 163 terawatt hours. And that again leads to CO2 savings of 32.8 megatons and without any measure, but it also leads to less air pollution because there is no particulate matter, PM stands for particulate matter, at the point of operation. And especially in these very hot days that we are looking at for this week, it's also important to note that heat pumps will not necessarily cool down cities, but at least we will avoid further heat pollution inside cities, and that will make cities slightly more comfortable than if everybody would have used fossil energy to create the hot water in this summer days. And also I've said that before, we have a demand response potential. This is really a potential at the moment of up to 3.2 terawatt hours over the year, because in most countries it is not used yet, largely due to the lack of a business case. But if we would connect all heat pumps and if we would use them in a way that would be helpful to stabilize the grid, then this would be the load shifting potential that we see. And now I come to what I said before. So when I talked about saturated market, then actually quite a surprise was when we looked at this and calculated the units sold per 1,000 households. And then you see that the majority of heat pumps, the most developed market is actually Norway, followed by Estonia, Finland, and Sweden. And that I was pushed by this by a colleague of mine, Jussi Hirvonen from the Finnish association, who always said, but you know, you give us these absolute numbers, well, but when we look at sales per households, then it's actually Finland that is very good. And so he was also disappointed that Finland only made it to position number 3. But nonetheless, it is interesting to see that heat pumps are selling best in the countries that admittedly have one of the most difficult or some of the most difficult climates, at least when it comes to heating. And now, while I say that, I think I should also do something like this for the countries that are most challenging for cooling, and then we have to see how that looks like. But if you look at it, France is certainly one of them, but the Mediterranean countries could benefit a lot from more heat pumps, especially when it comes to reversible units and when it comes to providing cooling and ideally using the waste heat in these hot summer days. In any case, also this supports once more from a slightly different angle that we have a huge potential and a huge untapped potential for heat pump sales in the rest of Europe, because I'm quite confident that if you can sell them in Norway, you can sell them everywhere on the same level, maybe plus and minus a few percentage points, but by and large, that is what the potential looks like. And if we calculate that based on the current market statistics, then we come to this graph. And this graph shows us quite clearly with a small red line where we stand today in terms of sales. And it shows how this annual sales would look like if we would have the same market situation as in Norway. So logically, Norway has the same sales and the same potential. Otherwise, the graph would not make any sense. Then you see that even France has still a huge potential. Italy has still a huge potential. Spain has still a huge potential. And other countries like Germany, they would actually explode. So the real question that we have to answer as an industry in the end is, are we ready? Are we ready to manufacture, to design, to manufacture, to install, to maintain this number of heat pumps in the future? If you know a little bit about how the markets look like, you can ask me, well, but Thomas, that makes no sense because the European heating market is not 9.4 million at the moment. Of course, that's correct. And there is a bit of this is a bit of a back of the envelope calculation, and we didn't do it super sharp. But what the graph should tell us is that the potential of heat pump sales is much bigger than what we are using at the moment. So let's see, how is that looking from a political perspective? This graph shows us the development of renewable heating and cooling in the European Commission from 2004. That was the first year that this data was collected until 2017. And you see In the dotted line with the green dots in the middle, you see that we have increased the share from 10.4% in 2004 to 19.4%. So you may think that this is a huge achievement, but I would think not, because you see the graph is quite flat. And we also see that it's less than 1 percentage point per year. And I will show you in a minute that the European Commission and the member states have agreed on a new target for renewable energy in heating, and this is 1.3 percentage points per year. So it shows this graph should be reflected based on that, because we have to increase the steepness of this development by a number of 2.5 or even 3. And if we look at the European boiler market, then we see that we have around 5.6 million boilers that are sold every year, and around 7.8 million sanitary hot water units, most likely because many people have more than one hot water generation device in their house. And in this context, the heat pumps in the heating side have around 19.6% of that market. And when it comes to the hot water heat pumps, we are at around 2%. So there is still a very clear domination of fossil energy in the heating sector in Europe. And I think it is fair to say that if we really want to decarbonize the heating sector, then we have to do much more to move fossil energy out, and heat pumps are a perfect option to do so. Let me come back to the political targets. We have recently received 3 new political targets. 2 that are attached to a value on the renewable energy side. We are moving from 20% that was foreseen for 2020 to 32% now for 2030. And the most remarkable part is that there is a specific obligation for renewable energy in heating, and this is connected to a 1.3 percentage point increase every year. On the energy performance of buildings, heat pumps are considered a very good solution for energy efficient buildings, and buildings have been introduced as active nodes in the energy grid. What is most interesting for us is that also the member states are advised and obliged to create long-term renovation strategies. And so from the heat pump perspective, we have to stress that heat pumps are also applicable when it comes to building renovation, and we're working on this as we speak. Then we have the Energy Efficiency Directive. While the renewable energy target is binding, the energy efficiency target is indicative, and the indicative target is 32.5%. And I find that quite revealing, because it says a little bit about what member states and the policymakers believe energy efficiency can do. You hear all the time we should focus on energy efficiency first, but what we see here is that nobody wanted to agree to make that target a mandatory one. But also here we have a decrease rate of 1.5% every year from today to 2030 of the final energy demand, and this is calculated based on a trajectory on a calculated demand. What is most important for heat pumps is that we have a new primary energy factor. The primary energy factor explains the conversion efficiency between primary, typically fossil energy, and in our case electricity, so the end-use energy carrier. And also this will help to bring heat pumps forward in the calculation, in the different calculations that are used both for the renovation strategies and for statistics. And we can simply conclude that all of these 3 will benefit the heat pump technology in the market. Then we have a new regulation on the energy union governments that gives a clear commitment to energy efficiency and decarbonization. And again, here we can say, if we want to achieve this regulation, then we have to be very ambitious and forward-thinking when it comes to the change of the technologies used in the heating sector. So heat pumps again will benefit. And that leaves me to the last one that is ongoing, because the member states and the Commission have said, okay, now we have settled everything that needs to be done by 2030. Of course, it has to be implemented on the member state level. But after that, we will look now what to do between 2030 and 2050, and then they have presented, the Commission, Mr. Cañete, that you can see in this picture, has presented a low carbon energy roadmap. And this low carbon energy roadmap recognizes that we need bold action. They are pushing, the Commission probably is pushing more than the member states, or at least I should say the Commission is pushing as much as 24 member states, and 4 member states do not want to have the target year 2050 attached to carbon neutrality, but 24 would agree to that. And so we are working on this together with the Commission. We could say the public consultation, or not the public consultation, but the consultation is still ongoing with the member states. And if you want to look at this, 2 scenarios are in line with maximum 1.5 degrees centigrade of global warming. And even though you read a lot about gas in the document, if you look at the underlying figures, then the reality is that the building sector will be decarbonized also in the calculations. I can explain more if you want in more detail, maybe in a separate course, or you can contact me directly. What we don't have is a new CO2 emission reduction target. And that is very surprising, because if we calculate the energy efficiency improvements and the share of renewable energy, then we would at least arrive far above the currently valid and accepted 40% target. And so the Commission has now proposed that we should move to 45% based on the 1990 values, while some green NGOs and think tanks, they have said that we can also achieve 55% with existing technologies, always by 2030. And the logic is actually that 55% by 2030 would be what is absolutely needed if we want to arrive at a decarbonized system by 2050. This decision process is still ongoing. So my interim conclusion is that we have seen that the recognition for decarbonization, for the need for decarbonization of heating and cooling, is increasing. We can conclude today that heat pump technology is accepted in all application areas, residential, commercial, and industrial. Even you could say in cars, because if you have an electric car, you need a heat pump for the battery management, and you will find heat pumps in your own household, in fridges, in air conditioning units, in dishwashers, in dryers. So sometimes I make this this comparison. I say everybody in a given room has at least 1 heat pump, but the most forward-looking ones have 5. I'm at 4 at the moment, so I have 1 more step to go. And we can also see that the market framework conditions are developing in a very positive direction, but still we have some obstacles. And one of the obstacles is the relative prices between electric power, and I took gas, but it's about the same for oil. You can see here that if I want to break even the operating cost between a gas boiler and a heat pump, then this graph shows me which seasonal efficiency I have to achieve. And you see here on the lower end that for Germany and Belgium, you have to have average efficiency of above 4. So if somebody can sell heat pumps in Belgium, you're a mastermind. And similarly, is the situation in the UK, slightly better in Ireland, Slovakia, Spain, Denmark, Estonia, and so on. And the green ones, Austria, Italy, Lithuania, Czech Republic, France, Netherlands, Norway, and Sweden, you could say they are the heat pump salesman's heaven, because there it's rather easy to sell heat pumps because you really save in operating costs, and so you can justify the slightly higher investment costs much more easily. Then we have the European energy taxation, and the European energy taxation still favors fossil gas. You can see in this graph that the majority of countries give more than 10%, or give close to 10%, 10 euro cents additional burden on electricity compared to gas. And then the last one, we are still lacking a CO2 price signal. And the person that you see here is Joachim Wenning. He's the CEO of Munich Re, one of the biggest reinsurance companies. So they are insuring the insurance companies that give the contracts to you. And he says the risk that they are facing now from climate-related damages is so high that they don't want to bear that anymore. So he suggests a CO2 price of 115 euros per ton as appropriate. And if we just calculate that for a typical building, single family house, 6 tons of CO2 emission per year, then it means annual pollution cost of 690 euros. So over 20 years, 13,000, and that's basically the investment of the heat pump, and then you can operate it on par with the gas boiler. So I think if we put the cost situation right, then actually the advantage of heat pumps will show even more prominently. In the long-term perspective, Europe has approximately 115 to 120 million buildings. If we assume that heat pump penetration of 75% is necessary, then this means 86 million heat pumps to be manufactured and installed by 2050. Or if we simply make an average calculation, 2.9 million every year, which is far ahead than far much bigger than today's annual sales. And that means that we have to ask ourselves, Are we ready? Is the value chain ready for that? Do we have simple solution for the different sectors, renovation, multifamily buildings, industrial, and so on? Do we have enough planners, architects, and installers? Are the building codes properly recognizing it? And last but not least, do we have enough financing options? With that, I would like to close. I am convinced that in principle, we can have a 100% renewable society by 2050 with heat pumps, but there is a lot of work ahead of us, convincing people, enticing people, and changing the whole energy system. Thank you for the moment, and I hand over to Valerie Laplagne, who is the Vice President of AFPAC, Association Française à Pompe à Chaleur. And we are very happy to have you here, Valerie, because as I've said, France is the biggest market that we are talking about. And it means really for us that probably other markets can learn a lot from what has happened in France. And after that, we will continue with Pascal Westring, who will briefly present the EHPA statistics tool, and is also available for questions that you may have. Thank you. And I see that Valerie knows the technology much better than me because she manages to put her screen up.
Thank you, Thomas. Thank you for the invitation. As you said, I'm Valerie Laplagne, a vice president from AFPAC. AFPAC is the French Heat Pump Association, which was founded in 2002. It gathers main players in heat pump sectors in France: manufacturers, installers, engineering offices, maintenance companies, and energy suppliers. We are about 60 members. And of course, we are a member of EHPA. First of all, I will present you the trends during the last 10 years. So there were several steps in the evolution of this market. First of all, the market was quite high in 2008, with more than 150,000 of heat pumps. And then it dropped during 2 years due to the credit tax decrease and also the economic crisis. So, there are also explanations about the oil price, which decreased a lot also, and finally bad references during these years of high market. Then from 2010 there was a completely flat market during 4 years, and in 2013 the market recovers due to the new building sector, because with the new regulation named RT 2012, there is an obligation of renewable in new houses, and this benefits a lot to heat pumps. Currently, more than 50% of new houses have heat pumps. In 2018, last year, as we are going to see it after in details, the renovation sector began to develop. What we can say about our French market is that the two drivers for the last years are, first of all, the new houses sector with the obligation of renewable, and second one, the renovation sector with a high level of subsidies. So if we go a bit into details, when we consider different types of heat pumps, the red line, the above one, is for air water heat pump. These are the main part of the market. The trend of this part of the market is globally the same as the whole market. Then the purple line you see under is for heat pump water heaters dedicated to sanitary hot water. That's what well, no, they were not in the figures just before, but they are detailed here. This market began to grow in 2011 and increased regularly since that to arrive to almost 100,000 of heat pump water heater, which is about the same level as for a heat pump. Then the blue line is for ground source heat pump. The market was about 20,000 in 2008, but unfortunately it decreased every year since that time to arrive to 2,500 now. That is quite a niche market, in fact. Finally, the green line you see at the end is for hybrids. We only get to get statistics on this market in 2015. This market is quite flat in front. It's not really growing for the moment, and we will see perhaps it growing in the next years in renovation, for example. So to sum up, the French markets last year was first of all for heating, it was growing of plus 18%. For heat pump water heater, it was increasing of plus 17%. And I didn't show them, but there are also air heat pumps with 10% of them for heating only. And this part was growing of plus 18% also. The renovation sector has increased last year more than the new building sector, which was positive. And the new building sector was positive anywhere also. So a bit more detailed about each type of heat pump for the last year. Geothermal heat pumps, first, they represent a small part of the market, 2.5%. And among them, the main one are water source heat pumps, which increase of plus 2%. And the small part of ground source heat pump decrease of minus 10%. Then air water heat pumps, they represent the main part of the market. And among them, there are B block. You can find B block, so that represent 91% of the market. B block, that means that is a split heat pumps. And they increased of plus 16% last year, when monoblock increased of plus 10%. So the total of the heat pump, either geothermal or aerothermal ones, increased of plus 15%. Then about geothermal heat pumps, the main part is in the renovation sector, 65%, and also we can say that medium temperature represents 70% among them. If we have a look at the heat output, there is a big part of them between 5 and 10 kilowatts, and another big part between 11 and 20 kilowatts. Both of them are mainly in renovation sector. If we go into details about aerothermal heat pumps, they are mainly installed in the new building sector, and there is about a third in the renovation sector. Most of them are B-block, so split ones. They represent 91%, and there is a small part of them, about a third, which are medium temperature. So that means that most of them are low temperature heat pumps. Then, considering heat output, a third have output less than 6 kilowatts. They are dedicated to new small houses. A second third is from 6 to 10 kilowatts. It's split, in fact, between new houses and existing houses. And the last third, from 11 to 20 kilowatts, is installed in existing houses. This part has increased, in fact, more than the others last year. This is showing the takeoff of the renovation sector in the heat pump market. And about other heat pumps, heat pump water heaters, they are mainly installed in new building sector, 61% of them, and the rest in renovation sector. In France, they are replacing electrical water heater mainly. And to end with the details, the hybrid heat pumps. This is, as I said, this is a niche for the moment, below 3,000 units. And a few words about air heat pumps. There were, the market was quite high, with 570,000 units, and it is in progress since the last years. And we consider that 10% of them are dedicated to heating. And they were growing of plus 18% last year. So to end with 2018, the key figures of the French market, heat pump market, are the following. First of all, a stock of heat pumps, all types, which is reaching 3,200,000 units. And the environmental impact, with the 6.7 million of CO2 tons saved, 1,660 kilotons of oil equivalent of energy saved, and a production of 19,300 gigawatt hours of renewable. And some economic figures also, a turnover of 3.1 billion euros, about 24,000 jobs, and 20 plants also in France. So now, what is going on in 2019? First of all, there are new conditions for the market because there is a new scheme for subsidies, which is called could boost. It's a bonus for replacing old boilers, especially oil ones. And there are several subsidies which can be added. And there is a co-finances with the utilities in the frame of energy saving certificates program. And also there is the National Renovation Building Agency, which is giving subsidies for modest income families. All that is giving quite a lot of subsidies, so that for modest income families, you can have almost 100% of the costs which are covered by the subsidies. That's why we can find offers for a heat pump at €1. And for all families, so the other ones, the subsidies cover about 50% of the whole cost, product and installation. So this all this give very good conditions for the renovation market, and this market we will see some tendencies from the beginning of the year. First of all, air water heat pumps, they are growing of plus 50%, and we expect plus 30% for the whole year 2019. Ground source heat pumps are growing of plus 9%, which is good after a decade of decrease, in fact. And finally, heat pump water heater are growing of plus 16%. They are following their development, and they are not concerned by the bonus, the code push, which is on heating. So the tendency here for 2019 is very positive, especially for air water heat pump, due to the high level of subsidies in the renovation sector. If it is confirmed, because these figures for this year are under consolidation, if it is confirmed, the market of heat pump would reach around 130,000 units for heating. And well, that is not again the highest level 10 years ago, but it is almost the same. And the market for heat pump water heaters would reach 120,000 units at the end of the year. In that context of very high development of the market, the priority of the sector of AFPAC is quality necessary to ensure a good and a sustainable development. So quality is necessary at each step of the installation. That means first of all, quality of the product. In France, almost all heat pumps are certified from 2008. So this ensures quality at the product level. Second step, quality of the installation. We have now 8,000 installers that are certified for heat pumps, but we need more of them to respond to the growth of the market. And we have in the certification mandatory audits on site to avoid bad performances, and we want that audits to be earlier and earlier in the certification process of the installers. And the third step in quality is the maintenance of the heat pump. AFPAC has published a toolbox for installers, including, for example, a list of actions for a good maintenance, or example of contracts for maintenance, all that for installers. And we need now more offers about maintenance to be developed. And to finish, for end consumers, AFPAC has published the 10 commandments to install a heat pump. So first commandment, define what are your needs in terms of heating, sanitary hot water, cooling, and so on. Second one, be sure that the installer is certified for heat pumps. Third, ask for several cost estimates to compare there and to make the good choice. Fourth one, don't pay attention to offers proposed without a visit on site. It is necessary. Fifth one, don't buy a heat pump at a fair, because in France, if you buy a heat pump at a fair, you don't have the right to resiliate. Sixth one, be sure that the product is certified. Seventh one, ask for the thermal study necessary to design your heat pump within the estimates. 8, verify that the offer includes acceptance document of work, putting into service, and pickup explanations. 9, demand written guarantee conditions. And 10, finally, ask for a maintenance contract to ensure the quality of the running part of the heat pump. So this is finished for my presentation. If you have any questions, well, I will answer them with pleasure.
Yes, thank you, Valerie. That was really encompassing, and I noted down 2 important things: continued increase, actually, and a continued and an accelerated increase in a market as big as France, which will give us more momentum for Europe. And I really like this 10 commandments for heat pump installers, because we need to make it simple for end users to understand what they should do when it comes to getting high quality installations. And this is, I think, as simple as you can make it, so that every end user that is interested can check it, can use the checklist and say, have I done everything that I can on my side to make sure that the installation that I will eventually get lives up to the promises and to the possibility. Because we see that rarely is it the heat pump that fails. It is quite often either the design or the non-fit between the unit and the building, or installer mistakes. So I think France is a great role model for things that you have to do when it comes to fast market development. Since also time is running out a little bit, we hand over to Pascal Westring and let him present the tool.
Okay, say hello so you know who is speaking to you. My name is Pascal, and I'm based in Edinburgh, and I offer services for any kind of data automatization from the whole pipeline, from cleaning data to building tools like this, or doing some predictive modeling and so on. So the way I want to do this is I want to introduce you to Anna. This is the fictional user of the tool, and Anna loves heat pumps, and her company sells air water heat pumps in Germany, and she also thinks about selling in France. Sadly, she didn't hear Valerie talking about the French market, so she has to inform herself, and she has a couple of questions. So how are these 2 markets doing? What are the drivers of these markets? And using those drivers, how will it develop in the future? to jump to the first question, we want to be able to select certain markets and heat pump types. We want to be able to compare across different countries and types of heat pumps. We want to check not only the sales, but also the dynamics, so the growth and the potentials. I show you a couple of slides now, and I will then jump into the live demonstration. So this is the overview of the sales, and then straightforward we click on the country and on the type of heat pump to select what we're interested in. We can also switch from sales to stock. So stock means that the stock of installed heat pumps that are running in the country, which is in statistical terms the aggregated sum of the last 20 years of heat pump sales. And then wherever you see a chart, there will be a download button which allows you to extract the data and the chart. So now I will switch to the browser and show you the live demo. Window. Okay, now we go. So I just do the same that you saw before. I click on France and I click on air water heat pumps. See the selection changes, and then we can scroll down to answer the other questions. So now we have a specific selection, and we can already see a couple of things. So this is Anna's home market, so to say, and we see the air water heat pumps here. It's a slightly different development than in France. And so here we a few quick questions already. And now we want to compare. So we go down, and we can compare different countries. It's important to see here that that the selection that we made on the top still applies here. Of course, we don't see only France, but also the other countries. But we only see the numbers aggregated for the air-to-water heat pumps. And so we see that, yeah, like Anna serves the German market already, and the French market is the second biggest for air-to-water heat pumps. So this might be a good idea. Then we go down, and then again, now we have only France selected in the selection, but we see also the other types. I hope this makes sense. So we see here how many air-to-water heat pumps are compared to all the other types of heat pumps. And when we hover over the bars, we can see the actual number. We can download the CSV data like this, and download the PDF like that. There we go. The next thing on the list was to see the market dynamics. So we scroll down a little bit, and we see the market growth by country. Now, again, bear in mind, it's only the air-to-water heat pumps selected, and we see that the biggest dynamic growth happened in France from 2017 to 2018. Then it's Netherlands and Germany are following up. If we where is the most announcement in terms of which heat pump types, we see that still that's a trend, as you have heard from Thomas before, for many years now, that the sanitary hot water heat pumps, this is a segment which is growing very dynamically, and but followed up by air, water, and reversible systems here. But again, bear in mind, this represents France now. So, to show you, I can just deselect France, 21 countries of Europe, and we go back here. So now we really can compare the European segments of heat pump types. I go back to the French selection and go down again. and we want to talk about the potentials. So that's thanks Thomas for describing this concept of dividing the sales by the number of households, so that we can see the maturity of a market. Now we see Switzerland is on the top. This is because again we have only selected the air to water type, and in this type the Swiss market seems to be the most mature. And so when we then go to the next step, same maturity level in all the other countries, how much potential is there still? So we can see here in Germany, as expected, there's a huge potential still to fulfill. And let us check France as well. So yeah, I would say this is about a third or so of this rough potential that we estimated here. So yeah, 2 good markets for Anna to continue growing in. And here also we have those peaks that you have seen in Thomas's presentation as well. So that's also, thank you Thomas for showing one use case of the tool, which is yeah, the reporting side. So all the charts were generated exactly here, and yeah, that was the point of making that easier to develop this in the first place. We have another button I can show you here, so we can switch from absolute to percentage values. Yes, so that's giving us a good picture about what's going on in the market. So this was the first question. Now we try to answer the second one, and this I switch back to the presentation. And now we want to focus on the energy price ratios. We also will have in the future we'll integrate more data from Eurostat, but the energy price ratios are by far the most interesting and influential quantitative data that we can use to build a model in the later stage. So I'm very sure that most of you are very aware why the price ratios are important, and so I just briefly explain it. So here what you see in this chart is the price ratio of the electricity against the gas price, and the high ratio means that gas is cheaper than electricity relatively, and that in turn means high operating costs for heat pumps compared to gas boilers, and so in turn this means bad market conditions for heat pumps. That's what Thomas also said before about Belgium and Germany. So yeah, people using heat pumps in these 2 countries must sadly be very idealistically driven and not financially. So we can here compare the countries. So dark red means bad conditions, and green means positive conditions. Then the next step, so we can also then select countries here in the map. As we've seen before, we can extract the charts as we've seen before, and here we see 3 different line charts. So just plainly the prices, and then below that we see the tax shares, and below that we see the development of the ratio. Interestingly, here is the tax shares can tell us a story about policy measures of the different countries. And now go to the live demo to show you an example of that. We can, a very nice example provided by the Netherlands, I think. So we see here, for instance, that that gas is taxated much higher than electricity, and in the last years, these policy measures have also had a huge impact on sales numbers in the Netherlands. So this is a positive story here. Whereas in Germany, electricity is higher, which explains why the market conditions are so difficult here. So, and again, as you would expect, if I click on download, we will generate the chart and have it to use. We have the same, like here we have an overview of which countries have the most beneficial and the most detrimental price ratios. And then the same exercise for electricity price versus oil price. So I'll switch back to the presentation. Important to have a few statistical rules in mind to how to interpret the model, and then we can shape the model along according to this. So again, I will show you some slides first. So we will plainly select a country and a type of heat pump, and then the forecast will change accordingly. We can modify the forecast. We can select different periods for the forecast, and we can enable or disable the different factors which go into the model. So for instance, the GDP is a very broad measure, and it might correlate highly with construction. So often the GDP is too broad a measure to explain a lot. So that's why sometimes it can be good to just switch that off. I just said that that often the GDP doesn't have any influence, or not a lot. A way we can see that is here in this little box. Here we see the contrary for the price ratio, which indicates that that it's very influential for the development of sales. And we see this is a point cloud which is skewed, and like it's directing from left up to right down. You can imagine a line going through this, and this says it's a negative correlation there. So now we'll switch again to the live demo, and I will show you the tool. We will start water. You see the forecast changed here. If I would select, for instance, like 10 periods, there's one statistical rule to bear in mind, is that it's the same with the weather. The more forward you're looking and trying to predict the future, the more uncertainty you will have, and so don't be surprised if, especially in a case where we don't have a good data situation, as we have in France, then like the results might be a bit unrealistic, too high, too low, or the model might go a bit crazy. But that's just normal if there are not many data points and just a lot of uncertainty if you would select 10 years or so. The same what I showed before, like we can switch on or off different factors, and then the model will adjust accordingly. Now we go into, I explain a little bit how we can shape one factor to change the model. So you see here the quick scenarios, and the default value is set to model, and model means this is basically like roughly just an interpolation from the past to the future. It's an autoregressive model that is used to just give an assumption of how this price ratio might develop in the future. But of course, you might have much better information. Maybe you would know that next year France will introduce different policy measures to steer energy prices, and so we could say, okay, maybe the price ratio will go even down more, and there we see that it has an impact. Oh, okay, it's jumping a bit. So here it has an impact. In this case, not a strong one, but you should. Deselected air water, which is okay. I do this again. Air water. Now we have the segment that we were interested in, and now I do this again from model to -5. We see now the big effect. It might not be realistic in the end, especially if I select 10 years now. But still, it's even not higher than the peak in 2008. So the model seems to be quite smart about that, and it assumes the right direction of correlation as well. The second method of have it flat, negative, or positive. The point cloud that I mentioned earlier here for the GDP, we see it's quite just a blob, and it says 2%. That means that this GDP growth explains only 2% of the variation of this change in sales, which is not a lot. In comparison to that, the price ratio explains 55%, which is a lot. And we can modify not only to brief forecasts, but also use it to get a feeling of how sensitive a market might react to different changes in different factors. And well, this is already the end of my tour. I think we have some limits on time anyway, and I'd like to open up the room for some questions that you might have, and I can jump into other fields of that I could not cover here. For instance, like one additional feature that we offer here with the tool is maybe not for Anna, which is interested in markets, but maybe for policymakers, or maybe for marketing professionals who want to generate positive messages of what the heat pump benefits are. So for that, we could use this module here, which is open to everyone until the most recent data, and then we can generate charts and messages showing how much renewable energy is created, how much CO2 savings are being provided, how much energy is saved, and how much energy was created. Thank you for some questions that I hope to answer. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Pascal. That was very interesting. And again, while you were speaking, I've tried to answer most of the other questions. Some of the questions that were popping up were on industrial heat pumps. We just wanted to clarify that we are only now collecting that data, so it's not yet in the system, and we are having quite a little bit of difficulties in getting that information. So it may take some more time before we have this available. Also, it was asked if we have thermally driven heat pumps in more detail. I think that Valerie has left us. I'm not exactly sure, but so the hybrid systems, and there is no hybrid system split at the moment between. Or can you answer that, Valerie?
Yes, thermal-driven heat pumps. Well, we don't have any statistics, in fact, in France, in AFPAC, and this is not in France. an important market at all for the moment. So we don't follow it closely.
Okay. Then we have a raised hand by Ales Bezedniak. He has also asked, how is the Norway heat pump market regulated? I'm not sure, Ales, can you explain your question? I think we didn't say that the Norwegian heat pump market is regulated. If the question applies to why is Norway so successful, then one reason is that Norway never had a gas grid, and traditionally, or not a significant one, and traditionally is using very little oil. So it is, in fact, an electric heating country. And if you replace a direct electric heating system with a heat pump, you save immediately 2/3 or even 75% of your heating costs. So it makes a lot of sense, and even economically, it's very viable. And I think we can say the same. Maybe you can comment on that, Valerie. Is that similar in France?
Is that similar as in
you
Norway?
Think the French market is very characterized by having an acceptance of direct electric heating, right? So you save a lot if you replace your direct electric heating system via with a heat pump.
Well, yes and no. In fact, in France, the electricity price is quite low. I think it's the main thing which is important for the development of the market. Then in renovation sector, what we see from the beginning of the year is rather replacement of boilers, and especially oil boilers. So that is not replacing the direct electric heating, in fact.
I don't see any further ones. The ones that were written down have been answered. There was one that I left to you, Valerie. What about the recognition of flammable or even explosive refrigerants in France? Is that an issue, or do you think that is solved and will simply be handled in a normal professional manner?
Well, it's not solved, on our opinion, because the regulation was updated last month, and but it put some barriers, in fact, on our European market. So it's not good for on our point of view. So we will have to probably to fight against that, especially on the security fire regulation in the buildings receiving some public people.
Yeah, I realize that. Maybe to clarify for everybody, at the moment you can't put flammable heat pumps with a flammable refrigerant into a public building. Is that correct?
Yeah.
In France.
Yeah. You can, but you have a lot of things to do for that, and it's quite impossible, in fact.
It shows quite interestingly how different member states of the European Union allow or not allow the installation of certain products. And as EHPA, we are looking at this at the moment from the perspective of a single European market. If I'm allowed to sell a heat pump for a certain purpose in Spain, for example, and I cannot do that because of safety considerations in France, then of course that is limiting my my market potential. Don't you think?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Then now we have a few hands up. So we have Nina
Dmitrenko. Yeah, thank you.
Dmitrenko. Nina.
I have a like 3-portion question. So Valerie, you mentioned in those list of what to do, what you need to do when before buying the heat pump, and it says like maintenance should be required. So my question is, like, if you have this certificate that covers maintenance, and then when the time comes and the heat pump is not performing the way how it's supposed according to its certificate, what happens? Like, how the regulation work around? How does it work around that? And so also about thermal test, like for the heat pumps, typically on the certificate it says like the testing that was conducted in the lab environment, which not always the same as like when the heat pump is installed in the building. So it's rarely matching in like on field and in the lab. So that's one question for Valerie.
Okay. The first question, you spoke about a certificate about maintenance, but in fact there is no certificate for maintenance. There is a contract between the consumer and the installer, which is providing maintenance. And so it depends on the contract. In fact, if the contract is a regular visit of the installation, or if there is a repairing actions in the contract, it's, well, the contract is free, in fact.
Okay, but you also mentioned something about auditing the performance of the heat pump.
Yes, the audit is about at least one installation in the frame of the certification of the installer. And okay. So your question was if the heat pump is not running when it is audited.
Yes.
What's
and
right?
not just not running. What if it's running, but COP of that heat pump is not matching the certificate value? Does it pass the audit?
During the audit, there will not be a performance test.
Evaluation?
In fact, it's other considerations, including the correct design, the correct running, but not the performance precisely. Okay. But if other things are not okay, in fact, the installer is losing its certification. First of all, he has to repair, and secondly, he will have another audit to verify another installation, and if he doesn't do all that, he will lose his certification.
Okay, thank you. And what is the thermal test? What does that cover?
So the audit don't have a specific thermal test. The thermal study I mentioned is the one which is done by the installer to design the heat pump in the existing house.
And how is it done?
So, well, there are tools for that to estimate, first of all, the losses of the building.
So is it some sort of energy modeling, or it's very rule of thumb tables?
Well, there are models for that.
Okay.
And so it is the job of the installer to calculate the losses of the building, and then to use also a tool to design the heat pump for this building.
That's a very good approach.
Thank you.
Thomas, I have a question, very quick one. For the stats that was presented, yes. In the general stock value, is regular, just conventional heat included or no? Or everything what it covers, it just heat pumps, it's not AC units?
We collect the AC units based on a study that was done by the Italian Heat Pump Association, and this has been repeated. So they have asked 5,000 households what primary heat supply they have in their house, and if they answered only an AC unit, then we have counted that percentage, and the answer was in around 10% of all the households they only had the AC unit, so this was also used for heating, and that's how we use that and we count that. So we can say that roughly 10% of the AC units are included, and the total sales of AC units is much bigger. But we also know that in many countries, the AC units is just an add-on to the normal heating system. So we don't count it then in that case as a heating device.
Okay.
And I would say I'm fully aware that we have to review that policy, because more and more houses are running based on reversible heat pumps, and that is enough. If you have a new passive house design with a heat exchanger, heat recovery unit, and then you provide cooling and heating and hot water from one device. So how is that counted then? And how is it called? I showed that at the beginning. We really have it's not an issue yet, but I think it's a challenge that it is called, the device is called a heat pump, even though it provides many services.
Mm-hmm. And one just clarification question with in terms of definitions, when you say something like air to water heat pump versus heat pump water heater, so what heat pump water heater, it's water to water heat pump, and air to water heat pump, it's not water heater?
Typically, this is the same technology, because the air / something means what is the energy source and what is the energy sink. And so an air to water heat pump is predominantly used for heating. In this case, an air to a water heater, domestic hot water heater heat pump, is also an air to water heat pump, but with a very specific target to provide hot water. And the air to water heat pump is mainly counted here for heating purposes, but quite often, I would say in the majority of cases, these are combi systems. So they can also provide hot water if they are connected to a hot water tank. The technology is exactly the same. The only difference in this case is the capacity. And temperatures, but mainly an air to water heat pump can have capacities we distinguish below 20 kilowatt and above 20 kilowatt. And a domestic hot water heat pump typically would have a capacity of around 3 to 4 kilowatts.
Thank you very much. That's all.
Yeah. I have a raised hand by Barbara.
Just a very quick comment to that. We have collected the last years. We collected more granular data on the capacities. So we will, in this in the next coming report, we will be able to show that. And it's a bit different from country to country, but we have way more fine-grained data from this year on.
Yeah, indeed. I see another question by Barbara Kaiser. Is that still relevant? A raised hand, at least.
Yeah, I'm still in.
Okay, and you raised your hand, so you have a precise question.
Yes. Because you just, my name is Barbara Kaiser from VDH in Cologne. Yes, Valerie, we know each other in Thomas. Hello to the others. You just mentioned the question about the relevance to AFPAC regulation in France, and I just wanted to add something from the German market. So that we had a discussion about 2 weeks ago with the German Association of Heat Pump. I don't know if somebody's around from them.
I didn't see.
I don't see anyone. So just want to add this. That, we see a big discussion in Germany about the pros and cons of natural refrigerants, and also that there are many different opinions in the market. And that is not very helpful for the growth of the heat pump market in general. So we decided that we make a little brochure. Mainly target group will be the policy, the politicians, maybe also the installers, to explain the difference between the different refrigerants. But not to say, okay, you have to use a special refrigerant and all the others are bad or are explosive or are toxic. So we want to have a neutral brochure to present it to everybody, and not to talk too much about low GWP, high GWP, but just to explain the mainly difference, and that's our way to deal with the discussion of refrigerants in Germany.
But you know what? This is a very important point, and we have been preparing such a brochure as EHPA for a long time, and it has a bit gotten stuck in the alignment procedure between the different players. So it could very well be an opportunity to just do this all together, because we had the same idea in mind. We wanted to show which refrigerants are available with their pros and cons, and just to show to the policymakers that this is what we have at hand. And the important point here is to state that we don't have so many solutions. So in fact, the F-gas regulation, safety concerns and toxicity concerns and availability of components has really limited the available solutions. So policymakers need to think twice before they make the set of available solutions even smaller. But I'm happy to share that with you, and then we can see if that makes any sense to you, and we can probably do it together.
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine. But I think it's really a discussion which is new after the big sound problem we had about 2 years ago here in Germany. Everybody was, heat pumps are really bad and nothing for high density new building areas, etc. So we have another discussion about the pros and cons of the refrigerants, and even the manufacturers are not in line with each other, and that's really bad. So we will want to avoid this discussion. So just to make sure there are different solutions, and every solution has his reason to be there. Yeah. But we're really happy to work together, and I'm really happy to see the existing document of EHPA, and maybe we can get some new ideas out of it.
Okay, perfect. And then I can also point to what the French Association has done in the past. They have done already a very nice leaflet showing the different available solutions, but it's mainly focusing on HFOs, if I recall correctly, and doesn't include the natural or natural low GWP solutions.
Yeah, exactly.
Good. With that, then I thank you all, especially the 68 people that endured, that stayed with us for such a long time now. If you have any additional direct questions, please don't hesitate to comment and to contact us directly, both myself, Valerie, Pascal, and myself. And we will work on refining the data collection further. So I hope that we will be able to answer a lot of the questions that were raised this year in a more comprehensive version in 2020. Last, you can look at all the details of the statistics at the statistics website on the EHPA domain. It's called stats, stats.ehpa.org. And there you will also find eventually a new report published that has more qualitative than quantitative data. Thank you very much for today. Thank you, Valerie. Thank you,
Thomas, just one last question.
Yeah.
Will you distribute the presentations or
yes,
not?
We will do that.
Okay.
I've answered that, I think, a few times. Maybe it's difficult to read the answers. Yes. So to everybody, the presentations will be made available to everybody. Thank you very much, and we will distribute it to the.
Yeah, sorry, Thomas, if I can may add something. Also, the video, the record of this webinar will be available for the people that attended.
Okay, thank you very much then, and have a nice evening and a good rest of the week.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Goodbye. Good evening. Bye bye.
Bye bye.